This morning we're going to look at Job. We're going to look at the whole book. Yeah, I know. I thought about that. Not real bright to try to capture this in one shot. But I've been sitting with this book for a long time. I think in April I did a summer series at another church, and it's been perhaps one of the most helpful books that I've meditated on, reflected on. One of the things that I've been experiencing lately, and I know all of us and some of you in particular, I've run into situations in life where God seems to do things that just doesn't make sense. And I've struggled with that. You know, I'm educated, well educated. I've been a pastor for a lot of years, but I continue to struggle with that. Why does God do what he does? And especially with pain and suffering, especially with pain and suffering, especially with the loss of life, with illnesses that are leading to death. And we've got a couple close friends that have come face to face with it. Another one just recently within the last 3 months. And so Job presents itself as the place to go to get answers for those kinds of things. After all, here's a guy that's afflicted and suffers incredibly. And in a lot of ways, Job does just the opposite. It's a book that really doesn't seem to answer at all. In fact, the answer that is given isn't even an answer when God answers Job out of the whirlwind. But there's incredible wisdom in this book. Incredible wisdom in this book. And it's been very helpful as I've processed and watched others process dealing with the trials and the struggles of life. And it's important to remember at the start that this book historically has been grouped in with wisdom literature. It's not simply a historical record of a guy named Job from a place called Uz. If you start there and try to stay there, it's going to be really squirrely. I mean, it's unusual. There's unusual characters in this book. Job himself, he's not a Hebrew. And the entire book is focused on him, one person. Super unusual in terms of Old Testament books. There's no mention of covenant. There's no mention of law. And then there's this unusual argument. We read just a few moments ago of Job as blameless, utterly blameless. There's no hint, no reference to the fallen nature, to indwelling sin. That doesn't even come up anywhere in the book. And then there's unusual suffering. You know, there's this cliche around the patience of Job, and it's thrown here and there. But we're not talking patience here. Job lost absolutely everything. Everything. His home, his livelihood, his children. His children. We just buzz by that. But let that sink in. And to make matters worse, what we read just a few moments ago, he's then inflicted with these awful boils. His body is clothed with worms and scabs, we read. My skin is broken and festering. So it's this super extreme, super unusual suffering. And then, frankly, and if we're being honest about what we're reading in the first 3 chapters of Job, we've got a very unusual God that's presented there. Can we at least acknowledge that in those first 3 chapters, he comes across as capricious, cavalier, utterly lacking in compassion, and toying with this man's life, making a bet with the devil? If we sit with that, what do you do with it? Part of this wisdom literature that's pushing us, I think, ultimately to give us great wisdom as we wrestle through these kind of hard questions.